It apparently happened while they slept. 5 members of the Outlaws, a motorcycle gang, were all shot to death. 4 men and 1 woman. No identities have been released. Police questioned the leader of the group, who also wasn't identified. He was the one who found the victims when he came to the house at 5 this morning. One of the gang members was found on the porch. He was apparently standing guard.
There was a guard on duty. There was one of the bodies that was found on the porch outside. And
was he on?
Yes.
He was armed?
Yes, but it does not appear that he even knew anybody was around, the position of the body and everything. So,
were the rest of them asleep?
It appears that they were asleep, yes. They were in the position that they would have been asleep. It was not an execution type thing where everybody was lined up and roped and shot that way. It appears that they were all shot inside of the, in a sleeping position.
Police say the Outlaws had a guard on duty because there had been some trouble with other motorcycle gangs, but they don't know if another gang was involved in the killings. Other members of the Outlaws came by later in the morning. Police questioned them. Police say, however, they have little to go on at this point. They've put out an alert for a small black sports car that a neighbor apparently saw at the house early this morning. Mark Garrison, WBTV News.
The New World Run is what this gathering by the Hells Angels has been dubbed. Bikers from the gang's chapters all over the world have been invited to attend the rally here at Carr Lake.
Bikers guarded the entrance to their camping site and kept outsiders away. Other campers and fishermen who had ventured out to Carr Lake found it quiet. The owner of the local marina says the Hells Angels have been coming here for several years and have caused no trouble.
I don't see any difference in talking with them and any other bunch of bearded people that run through the country, really. I'm sure they're from all walks of life. I've certainly found the ones that has been backwards and forwards here, just normal people.
Bobbitt says he believes all the publicity about the bikers kept some regular visitors away, but some fishermen came anyway.
You know, they don't bother anybody, and I think possibly the image that they have got is just, you know, some of them might be hoodlums or what, but I mean, here they've been just as nice as they could be, and what, so I never heard any, complaints about, had done anything bad.
Many of the bikers were staying at local hotels to keep dry during the rain. Hotel managers say there's been no problem, and to make sure it stays that way, bikers in a blue van have been patrolling the parking lots.
The Vance County Sheriff's Department and the SBI have been monitoring the activities of the bikers. The authorities say they've had no trouble from the bikers and they don't anticipate any. Brenda Summers, WBTV News, Vance County.
The Tom Thumb Bar on Rossell's Ferry Road. It's a hangout for bikers. At midnight, there were 8 of them standing around this pool table inside.
Everybody was just basically congregated in this little area right here, and somebody emptied a machine gun into the building. I'd say 10 rounds plus.
Did you realize at the time what was happening?
And no, in the beginning I thought it was just a string of fireworks going on.
When you realized it wasn't?
About after the 3rd bullet went through.
What'd everybody do?
Hit the floor. I grabbed my gun and ran outside. And I had one friend of mine follow me out and grabbed his gun, and we looked up and down the street, and there was nothing. And when I came back in, I asked if everybody was all right. Everybody said yeah, so I felt pretty good until one person said no. And I looked down, and there was a man got shot behind the left ear.
Dead on the floor was 20-year-old Robert Edward Brown of Charlotte, a regular at the Tom Thumb. This morning's shooting followed by only 2 weeks a similar attack, which left these bullet holes in the outside wall and a window. Another bartender was injured then.
People here don't know who shot at them, but everyone, including police, agrees it looks like the same people who took those pot shots 2 weeks ago. Police think one of Charlotte's motorcycle clubs is responsible. Whether it's a club or not, the owner, Joker, is sure it's revenge, though for what, he's not sure.
No one will speculate publicly about who took the shots, though there were 4 men in the car from which the shots came.
You gonna stay here?
Sure.
It's kind of dangerous, isn't it?
Goes with the territory. I need a job, I got a job. Cross the street and get run over by a car.
You gonna be any more careful
Can you do
No,
anything more?
there's nothing you can do on something like that. It just comes in, it happens so quick, you know. If you're hit, you're hit. If you're not, you just say, well, I did something right today.
The Tom Thumb will be open for business as usual tonight, while police continue to look for suspects. Brian Thompson, WBTV News.
Neighbors said they heard the explosion about 5:15. They described it as sounding like a sonic boom. No one was inside the K&K Comfort and Conversation Lounge when the explosion occurred. One side of the building was heavily damaged and debris was thrown hundreds of feet. Investigators from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms began collecting pieces of the building this morning. They'll be used to determine exactly what type of explosive was used. They suspect dynamite. Owner Brenda K. Swint said she had no idea who would try to blow up her business.
She hadn't had anybody make any threats or anything to you that they were going to blow the place up or anything?
Neighbors said the explosion is just the latest in a series of violence at this location in the last few weeks, and at least one said this latest incident is enough to make her think about moving.
It makes you really wonder if it's safe out here, and it's gotten bad, and I just can't take it. I told my youngins that we was going to have to find another place because I couldn't take this living right here. It's too nerve-wracking.
This is the second Charlotte massage parlor to be bombed in the past 2 months, and last month a man was murdered outside another one of Charlotte's sex businesses. Police speculate the incidents are connected to a power struggle between two rival motorcycle gangs. Graham Wilson, WBTV News.
This 21-gun salute is the climax of the Outlaw funeral ceremony, a violent end to a funeral for a man whose life had ended violently. The Outlaws were burying 21-year-old Terry Allen Surratt, who was shot off of his bike by someone in a passing car. In 1975, the Outlaws left Charlotte for a while, but they returned a short time later. Now, in the wake of these 5 murders, only about 5 members remain in the Charlotte chapter of the Outlaws. There are hundreds statewide. They are known as a gang. They prefer to be called a club, a group of guys who like to ride motorcycles, get drunk, and do what they want to when they want to. The leader identifies himself only by his nickname, Chains. He didn't want to be photographed. Everyone in the Outlaws has a nickname. In fact, Chains says he doesn't know the real names of some of his fellow outlaws. You have to earn your colors, as they say in outlaw language. It's like pledging a fraternity. Well, almost.
Big time sorority stuff where you go through all kinds of different tricks and games and stuff to get into something. It's a family, it's a brotherhood, man. It's just something people care about.
They like motorcycles and guns. Chains says they don't look for trouble, but they don't run from it either. With their long hair, tattoos, leather jackets, and dirty jeans, they have the rebellious look of the early 1970s. Why are they named the Outlaws? Maybe not because they're outlaws in the criminal sense of the Old West, but because they're outlaws of society, with a value system all their own.
Hell's Angels from across the United States and several foreign countries are expected to gather at Carr Lake next week, in numbers approaching 2,000 and for as many as 10 days. Police speculate the Hell's Angels may elect officers at the gathering. Gang members from the 30 North American chapters and chapters in Australia, New Zealand, and Europe have reportedly been invited to the Carr Lake meeting. The rally, called the New World Run, is expected to take place at Carr Lake's Satterwhite Point.
HAMC, the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club's East Coast chapters, have held their 4th of July get-togethers here for 4 years now, and this campground is the likely site for this year's New World Run.
The apparent meeting site is a scenic and secluded lakeside spot. All the lots have been reserved for several days next week, and the campground owners suspect that, as before, the campers will be Hells Angels.
I would not be hesitant to rent them a campsite. Of course, I'd rent anybody a campsite, and I do not ask their address or where they live or why they want to rent a campsite.
Their experience with the motorcycle gang in the past has been memorable and pleasant.
We've never had a finer group of campers. They left our area in excellent condition. They were very amenable. They were very cooperative. And I would say just ideal campers. I just found them to be delightful people.
Don Ross, Channel 11 Eyewitness News, Car Lake.
Yeah. 1725.
All right.
125.
If they have that right as citizens, they have the right as long as they trouble no one.
I don't think it would bother me in the least bit because a few of them we heard about a month ago, and they were real nice. They were all gentlemen. They were just as nice as they could be.
They're good people, as far as I'm concerned. You know, just like a rattlesnake has a reputation of being mean, but they don't bother you unless you bother them. They won't bother you.
Police at one point thought as many as 2,000 Hells Angels would gather at Car Lake this weekend for the 4th of July rally, but now expect fewer than 500 of the bikers. The motorcycle gang's behavior at these annual gatherings is simply not in keeping with the popular notion of the Hells Angels. The police say they've never had a serious incident at an Angels rally. Merchants at the lake say the bikers are always courteous. The owners of the private campground where the rally is held say the Angels leave the camp area cleaner than a lot of regular campers. Not all the Angels are camping out at the lake. Scores of them stay at nearby motels. The manager at the Holiday Inn says the bikers are not rowdy and keep mostly to themselves.
They're well behaved and they really don't bother anybody as long as they're left alone. They pay their bills and go on down the road.
Hotel guests who spent last night in the same hotel had no complaints.
It wasn't bad at all. I mean, I didn't really know they were there until about 5 o'clock this morning.
Starting the motorcycles and 5:30 in the morning was a little bit too much, you know. Yeah.
Satter White Point, where the gang is encamped, was nearly deserted, more the weather than the Angels, although this family had some initial fears.
We rode in to see what it looked like, and since we didn't see anyone, we did stay to eat, but I don't believe we would camp overnight here.
No gang members would be interviewed, but Amanda Wall is spending the week with the Hells Angels.
There's a lot of singing goes on, a lot of, you know, just raising a lot of hell, just having a good time.
Don Ross, Channel 11 Eyewitness News, Car Lake.
All right. How is it that you came to know the women who were involved with the bikers in the first place?
I was involved in prostitution myself.
And what happened?
Well, I was in the clubs, and I would see these girls that were mistreated or, you know, needed help or that was on drugs. And I, you know, was like a mother. I couldn't stand it, so I, you know, gave them my name and telephone number and told them if they ever needed me to come and see me.
And did they?
Yes, they did.
And what did they say to you, and what did you see when they came to see you?
Well, one girl, her old man was in jail, and she wanted to make some money to get bond money for him to get out, and she couldn't get a job in one of the parlors. So I introduced her to some of my clients so that she could raise some money to get her old man out of jail.
How did you find that the bikers treated their women, the women who came to see you?
Well, in a father-like way, in a lover way. They showed them attention. They mistreated them, you know, when the girls misbehaved. When they found out the girls were going out and slipping extra money out and buying drugs that they, you know, did not approve of or allow them to have. And then they would, you know, spank them or give them a whipping or whatever, you know, to show them who was the boss.
What kind of tales did the women tell you when they came to you in terms of how they were mistreated from time to time?
Well, one girl came and she had been burned, and it was jealousy from another girl that was of motors, you know, belonged to one of the bikers. And they took a cigarette and burned her because there was a conflict of interest over the men, and you know, they were jealous of each other. So one had done too many drugs, and she was sort of passed out, and they burned her with cigarettes just to, you know, see her flinch. But it wasn't a biker that did it. It was one of the other girls in the gang.
Well, how would they burn her? Where would they burn her?
On her butt, on her breast, you know, places where she couldn't work. You know, so she would have to do something else. And then they didn't have any use for her. She wasn't bringing in money.
Well, why would a woman join the bikers in the first place? knowing that there was the possibility of this kind of maltreatment?
So that they would have someone that showed them that there was someone that cared about them, someone they would fit in with these people. They had incest. One girl, her father had tried to rape her, and her mother said, well, you know, you're a whore, it was your fault, you know, you did it. So this girl was 14 or 15 years old. And so she, you know, goes down the street, her mother kicks her out of the house, and then she gets, you know, on the back of a motorcycle, and here she goes. They show her love and affection and attention, and then they send her out to prostitute, and the girl brings in, you know, anywhere from $900 to $15 a week, and they pat her on the back, and they say, you know, you did a great job. Now, here's $100 or $50, go buy you some new clothes. I love you, you're great. Which, you know, she got kicked out from home.
What kind of life did she have at home before she joined the bikers?
A lot of the girls had money. Their parents were wealthy, or, you know, middle class, upper middle class people, but there was no time for the girls. The parents were involved with their social things, and the mothers were doing their Valiums. That's where most of the girls learned to take drugs. They see their mothers and their fathers drinking alcohol and taking Valiums. And they got, you know, used to this. And then they would buy the children. They'd say, here, take this $10 and take the car and go. And then the girls would go where the excitement was at. And this was with the bikers, because there is a hell of a lot of excitement there.
For example?
For example, you know, going in and riding and raising hell and drinking and shooting and the wild parties and the orgies and, you know, it's just a different, you know, from most 15-year-old girls have been raised in. It's just a different atmosphere. It's like a fantasy land. Not perhaps a good fantasy, but you know, it's different. It's a challenge.
And why do they stay with them, the girls?
Well, the girls stay with them because they have nowhere else to go. They have no one else to turn to, no one that can understand them, understand their problems, their needs. The bikers do give them love and attention as long as they're out making the money. The bikers are good to them as long as they don't, you know, get on the needle and they don't get so fucked up with drugs or messed up with drugs that they can't go to work. Then they're good to them.
And what happens when they get messed up on drugs and so on?
Well, then they get a little abuse, a little beating, you know, to say, this is not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go out and make the money.
Well,
and you can't do it if you're messed up.
Why do the women then stay with the bikers even though they are abused from time to time?
They have nowhere else to go. And, you know, some women like to be abused, or some people like to be abused sometimes. They feel they don't deserve anything better. They deserve the abuse.
How important are the women to the bikers?
Very important. Very important.
In what way?
Well, the girls carry the drugs. The girls make the money. The prostitution is one of the biggest and best money makers of all time. It's been here for ages, and it's going to be here for a long time. So this is, you know, if the girls would realize, hey, we could control the guys because we're bringing in the money, but they don't know that because they're mostly young girls. Anywhere from, I've seen them 13 years old. You know, but after, you don't see very many 30 or 40-year-old motorcycle mamas. They're mostly in their teens, early 20s.
Why do they call themselves motorcycle mamas?
Well, they just call them mamas because they take care of all the men.
In what way do they take care of them?
Well, it's sexually. If one brother comes in, he sees another, you know, and he wants his old lady, well, then they share.
Do they ever sell the women to one another?
Sell or trade them.
For example?
For a pound of pot, or, you know, and then if, you know, the girl wants to go, then, you know, she doesn't want to go, she runs away, but then they find her. Or either she ends back up and says, well, I'll accept this, I'll go with him.
Now, if a girl runs away from the motorcycle gang, what happens to her if they find her?
Well, usually she goes back and starts right in fresh, and, you know, they're going to be good to her, and they're, you know, she's going to make money, and they're going to, you know, everything's going to be fine. This is, you know, she goes back home to the same atmosphere, or she has nowhere to go, except back to the bikers. If she goes home, then they call her, you know, she gets depressed and whatever, she calls them.
Well, don't they get angry if a girl runs away?
Well, for everyone that runs away, there's two to replace her.
Now, why did the women who came to you for help, who were members, or at least motorcycle mamas, why did they run away from the gangs?
Well, they either got frightened, or they were sick, physically sick, or mentally sick, or they, you know, they just needed someone to talk to, besides, you know, other girls that were in the same situation that they were. They had a little more respect for me because I was independent. I had no boss. I worked for myself. I had my own clientele. I had no one. I kept my money. I didn't turn my money over to anyone. And they respected, you know, they liked this. That's what they wanted, you know, but they couldn't do it.
Why couldn't they do it?
They didn't have the knowledge. They didn't have the guts to say, you know, listen, I'm not going to do this, you know.
Why were they frightened? You said that's one of the reasons they came to you.
Well, it's a scary thing to be, you know, to be pulled off of a job or get home from, you know, working in a massage parlor, and then you've got 6 or 7 guys from out of town, and you've got to give all of them blowjobs or, you know, have intercourse with all of them.
And what did you tell them when they came to you? What would you say to them? How would you counsel them?
Well, you know, tell them that they had to believe that they could do better. They had to want better. They had to, you know, that this was the first step, that unless they wanted help and they wanted to do better, they wanted to come over to the house and cry on my shoulder, they could listen. But if they wanted to help themselves, then I would help them.
Did it work very often? Did they listen? Did they leave the motorcycle gangs, or would they go back?
Most of them would go back. Most of them would go back.
Why do you think so?
Well, because they didn't have anywhere else to go. There was no place that they could go to for shelter, and I could not afford, you know, to feed and clothe and keep the house, you know, and counsel. And so they had nowhere else to go except back to what they were accustomed to doing, the only way that they knew to make a living. And they did provide, you know, shelter for them, and they, you know, found jobs for them, and you know, they made good money. I mean, $1,500 a week is a lot of money for, say, a 15, 16, 17-year-old girl. And they got a lot of praise and pats and said, you know, you're great, you're fantastic, you know, you did great, I love you, and, you know, here, you know, you can have this present, and I'm going to give you some Valiums, or I'm going to give you, you know, this, because you really did good this week. So that's what they would go back for, is for the praise.
What, the motorcycle bikers, if you will, have a whole behavior code and a whole set of a whole way of behaving and so on. And I wondered if you know anything about that, if you could tell us about it. In other words, how does a biker become a biker, and how does he earn his colors and that kind of thing? Do you know how that works? How does one become a member of a motorcycle gang?
Well, the guys that are members of a motorcycle gang is similar to the same way that the girls become motorcycle mamas. They're misfits in society. They have no one else, no parents that love them, or they're, you know, it's just like birds of a feather flock together. And these are just people that don't have anyone else or love, and they just organize and get together.
And what do the colors mean to them, these special patches that they put on their jackets?
Well, that's like their coat of arms, their, you know, their chapter, or their, you know, that's their, like the American flag. That's their, so they can identify each other, you know, the different groups or the different clubs.
How important are these colors to them?
Very important.
I've heard that they would even die for the colors, or kill for them, for that matter.
It's true.
Why is that so, do you think?
Well, that is their life. I mean, they totally devote themselves to their brothers. That's the reason they can share their women with their brothers. They can, whatever worldly possessions they have, the brothers are, they share everything equally. They share their women, their money, everything is shared equally.
How is it that the code of secrecy works so well with these people? In other words, why do you not find very many of them ever talking out publicly about what happens within the organizations?
They're afraid. They're not educated. They don't know how to, go about it. They just want to be left alone. They want to do their thing, and they have nowhere else to go, and they don't want any outsiders sticking their nose in their business. I mean, they're very private people, and they, run most of the prostitution in this area, and the drugs, and but everybody has to have a way of making a living, and this is the only way. Most of them are very uneducated. There's exceptions that, some bikers are educated, but this is the only way that they know how to make a living, the only way that they know how to survive, and survival is the name of the game.
And so they're afraid that if they talk about the way in which things operate,
Right.
what might happen to them?
Right.
What might happen to them?
Well, they're going to get locked up. They're going to get put in jail because prostitution is not legal in this state.
Are they concerned?
And drugs are not legal.
Are they concerned at all about retaliation from other members of the organization?
Yes. They, they have a code, and they have. I mean, it's like, joining one of the large groups. I don't know, one of the organizations. You have to swear to secrecy, and that you have to, your family, everyone, your brothers are members. That is your family. That is the only family that you have, and they all stick together.
And if one betrays the other, what is that like? How would you compare that?
Well,
is that the worst thing in the
too
world?
bad, yeah.
That could happen?
Yeah, too bad. Because you're going to get, blown away, or, something's going to happen because you don't betray.
This process of intimidation must work pretty effectively, I guess.
Yes, it does.
Are these gangs concerned about law enforcement agencies or policemen at all?
Not really. They dislike the law enforcement agencies and the policemen. I mean, they've had a lot of raw deals. I know, been set up, and they've been unjustly, accused of things because of their background or whatever, and they've just copped an attitude that, the cops are bad. They're crooked, which there's crooked people in everything, every types of business.
Do you think that they have much fear of the police, the way the motorcyclists operate? Do you think they have much fear that they're going to, the police will be successful?
I don't think they have any fear at all. They have no fear of anything.
Why is that?
Because, that's what they go, that's their code. They have no fear of anything. I mean, they do what they want to do. And, if they die tomorrow, then they die tomorrow. But they're going to live and do what they want to do or what they have to do to survive. And then when they die, they have a big funeral and, a lot of respect, from the other bikers.
What, can you describe for me this ritual that they go through at the funerals, in which maybe, I don't know whether you can describe that or not, but apparently that's a really unorthodox kind of ritual that they go through.
I'm not familiar because I don't go to funerals.
Yeah, okay. Why do you want to remain anonymous during this interview that we're doing?
Well, I don't want any harm to come to me or to my children. And I'm doing this interview not to hurt anyone, the bikers or the girls that work for the bikers. I just think if the public knows what's going on and how these people got here, I mean, why would anybody want to grow up and say, oh, I want to be a biker when I get big, or I want to be a motorcycle mama when I get big. When I grow up, you don't hear these dreams. These are situations that people have to go into. These are lifestyles that they're forced into. They have no other areas to turn to. So they are recognized. This is, you know, a group, and they stick together, and this is their thing. I mean, everybody needs to belong to someone or something, to be loved and to be cared for, or to, you know, have other people that can understand, well, I came from a very poor family, or I was abused, or I was left out. My parents didn't love me, or I don't have an education, but I am bad. You know, I can take it. I can take it. And most of the bikers that I've met, they do not fear death. I mean, they're willing to do whatever you know, they have to do.
What does that include? What kinds of things do they do?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, they sell drugs, and they have the girls that go out and work and bring in the money, and that's what they do. And they, you know, if they're not going to let anything stop them. I mean, the drugs are here. Someone has to sell them and get them in the streets. Prostitution's here. Someone has to be in charge of it, so the bikers are in charge of it.
Are they in any way encroaching on the territory of the mafia?
I have no idea.
Okay. Cut for a second. Do you have anything else?
About out anyway.
Yeah.
North Carolina, got into Gaston County, this area.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, like there was a Southern gentleman and the Tar Heel Stompers and the Brothers, which was local people that liked to ride bikes with their wives, or, you know, guys that got together and liked to ride bikes. And then the Outlaws moved in, and then it's more or less they ran all the local people, that family people that were in the Southern Gentlemen or the Brothers or the Tar Heel Stompers, and then it just merged into the Outlaws. And then the Hells Angels came in. But
let me ask you something. When there is violence committed against one gang or the other, one group of bikers or the other, how do those people handle that? Why do they not cooperate with the police, for example, in the investigation of the murders? How do they view what happens to them, and how do they handle it?
well, they handle it. They don't want the police in, because they do not like the police, because they have, you know, they don't trust them. I mean, you know, they just rather, they're family, and family takes care of family business.
In what way? For example, if one gang or one group is attacked, how will they handle that? How might they handle it, I should say?
How might they handle that? Well, you know, they might, you know, just get together and just have a big fight or a big shootout, or, you know, like the 1979 4th of July massacre. And I have no idea, you know, where that came from.
I presume from that they don't have any sense that the civil authorities will bring about justice for them.
Right, because they're bikers, you know, and most people look at bikers like they're garbage or they're dirt. They're human beings, just like you and I. They need, you know, they're flesh and blood. They're not trash, they're not dirt. They're just different than we are. And they need, you know, help in certain areas, which we all do. God helps us all, but these people just have their little group together, or their large group together, and they take care of each other. They don't want any outside help. They don't want the police coming in, or, you know, someone else coming in and saying, hey, you know, we'll help you do this. They want to do it on their own, because they trust their own. They don't trust anybody else. If you're a biker, then the other bikers trust you.
Okay. Good. Cut. Okay, is there something you'd like to tell us that we didn't cover?
Yes, I would like to see a program, not only for the girls that go into prostitution, but for the young boys that have nowhere else to go, and they do not belong with society. and they go with the bikers so they can be somebody. And the same thing with the girls, a program for the girls so that they do not have to go into prostitution unless they want to. And they can get help. I would like to see the government, either state or county or federal government, make some program, and they send a lot of foreign money to countries, you know, to help, and we need the help here for our children. And I think that some federal money should be put to, you know, for the girls to go, so the girls will have a place to go when their parents run them off, or they, you know, just are misfits in society. They feel like they don't belong.
Good. Cut. Good.
Boy, instead of listening to what people are saying on the team, it's best to call the kids at the top of it. And then the guy from the funeral service kept calling me to come. The guy from the place here. I wish we had. He's born in
If you guys are willing, we'll go down there. That guy's doing fucking focus with that thing. Suey, if you could get maybe some of these people standing out here that give me some good... How much tape we got left? Oh, we got money. Did you change tapes? Yeah, they'll throw dirt on him and maybe throw bullets onto him. Bullet shells.
Our best bet, if we want to, is when we get all the cameras here.
Let the first go.
And I'm ready. No, it won't.
Louis, let me... Anytime.
How many members of the outlaw motorcycle gang have you successfully prosecuted?
I believe the number now is 21.
And tell me a little bit about how you got involved in these cases. Was it a case of police, local police coming to you, or how did it all evolve?
Well, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Tampa Police Department, and Jacksonville Sheriff's Office brought the U.S. Attorney and the FBI the cases that they had been working on and had not been able to get prosecuted before that. And initially the U.S. Attorney indicated an interest in the cases, and then we had what we called the Special Litigation Unit or Special Prosecution Unit, and they were assigned to that. And since I was in charge of that, I handled the cases.
What's tough about prosecuting and getting convictions and bringing cases against motorcycle gang members?
The two toughest things are, number one, they have a very strict code of silence. They are very violent. They are reputed to be very violent. People don't want to testify against them. Insiders don't want to turn on them. And because of that, it's difficult to get witnesses and to convince those witnesses that they can testify safely.
What made the difference in these particular cases then, here in Florida? How did you start cracking the outlaw gang?
Well, as I think one of the differences is the federal government has resources that the state governments just don't have. The federal prosecution team is ideally suited to take on interstate groups, groups that are difficult to penetrate, groups that tend to ignore state boundaries and law enforcement boundaries, because we do have the ability through a federal grand jury and through the FBI and other agencies to reach out throughout the country, both for resources and information, and to compel witnesses to come forward.
Why has it taken the federal government so long to get involved in motorcycle gangs and to start working on them as an organized crime problem? I think the FBI just started its task force in 1981, and yet, you know, local prosecutors, both at the federal and the state level, have been saying for a long time that it's a big problem.
I think there are several factors that influence that. One is that traditionally federal law enforcement has not directed its efforts toward or impacted generally on what's called street crime or violent crime. Federal statutes don't tend to address violent type crime directly. The Reagan administration under Attorney General Smith, after their initial commissions and reports on violent crime in America, recognized that the federal government had to find a way to assist the states in impacting on violent street crime. And I think that finally led to our directly addressing gang violence as an area that perhaps federal statutes could be used to impact on violent crime.
Why are motorcycle gangs organized crime? What does that mean in terms of motorcycle gangs?
Well, I think, again, that's where there's been some change. For a long time, people only talked about organized crime in the old-fashioned traditional sense, the La Casa Nostra, the mafia, the idea that there was a group of families, if you will, that were united together by blood and relationship and nationality, and or by a long-time close association in the big northern cities to conduct organized criminal activity in a systematic way. And I think that what we've come to recognize, both as the motorcycle gangs and in the drug trafficking through the new programs now in the organized crime drug enforcement task forces throughout the country, is that organized crime is simply those groups that have banded together in a very sophisticated fashion to conduct their efforts to commit crimes across state lines and on a national basis, and in motorcycle gangs on international basis.
When you look at these motorcycle gang members, and even when you investigate their lifestyle, they look like such dumb slobs. Tell me a little bit about the kind of minds that are at work here and what they've been able to do organizationally.
Well, I think the evidence that we have presented publicly has shown that their public image is a well-constructed one, and it is an image that they rely on and utilize not only for recruitment purposes, not only to convince young men and women that their lifestyle and their organization is one that they ought to join and support, but to intimidate the general public and to keep the general public at a distance so that it doesn't have any interest in finding out what they're up to. The cultivation of that image in itself indicates that they are more sophisticated and perhaps better organized than one would give them credit for.
about their links with traditional organized crime. Now, one of the cases that you made here, the Tampa case, as I understand it, did in fact include finally the jailing of a La Cosa Nostra contact. Is that right? And which family was that? And can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, I don't think there was any evidence presented on the record to directly connect that contact, that defendant, to a particular family. And so I won't comment, since it's not on the record, as to what family it might have been connected with. I think that one has to recognize anytime one's dealing with interstate groups that are involved in organized criminal activity, that the traditional organized crime families always have a stake or an interest in that type of activity, and there's going to be a connection. There's going to be a proven interrelationship between those various groups, just as the evidence presented in our trial showed a connection between the Outlaw Motorcycle Club and the Bandito Motorcycle Club in Texas, and that they were obviously participating together in some joint activities. Similarly, the evidence in our trial showed connections between the Outlaw Motorcycle Club and motorcycle gangs in the south part of Florida and other parts of the country that are not considered one of the big four, one of the most recognized of the criminal motorcycle gangs, but were smaller gangs that are utilized by the big gangs to do their activity, that are associated or subordinates with them.
I think it's nice for this biker girl to walk just right through the shop while we're doing the interview. So what you're saying is that there are some and they say there's no crime right here next to the courthouse.
Not true. This is a derelict popular spot in town.
So are you beginning to understand more about the kinds of jobs that motorcycle gangs might be carrying out for La Cosa Nostra and traditional mafia crime families?
I think that's being demonstrated in investigations around the country and is being revealed publicly in trials around the country, that there are, after all, this group is willing to do just about anything that'll make it money, particularly if it involves drug activities or violence or prostitution. They're already within their own organization well organized and systematic in their approach to those crimes. And certainly our evidence showed they were not going to pass up an opportunity to get involved in those kind of activities for profit for somebody else.
You mentioned before that people tend to keep their distance from motorcycle gang members. What kind of effect do they have on our communities where they come into our towns?
That's hard to say in this respect. People, generally the public, citizens, tend to want to shy away from them. They intimidate them by their personal appearance, by the aura that has grown up, by the fact that the media and newspapers, films have depicted them in ways that lead the general public to believe they can't cope with. That creation of that myth has become important to their movement in society, but they tend to stay to themselves by choice. It's to their advantage, however, to have that myth available when they do have to deal with the public. If they want to take over a bar for the evening, if they want to use a park that other people are using, if they want to recruit people for their activities, then that myth, which it is, and it is a myth, is one that they can rely on.
I guess the question is, though, then, why is it important to us that the federal, to us, and when I say that, I guess I mean the average citizen, why is it important to us that the federal government has gotten involved in breaking up these gangs?
Well, because of the fact that the impact from their criminal activity on society is very large, even though they're small in number and their activities are centered in specific areas. The evidence at our trial here in the Middle District of Florida demonstrated that they actively, for example, recruit teenage women who then are really led into a life of bondage, prostitution, and drug dealing. It is not a pretty life. It's one in which the outlaw male gang members and later the old ladies who have survived long enough actively recruit people. They use what they call a honeymoon period to convince them that this is going to be the fun and excitement that they always thought it would be. but many of those witnesses that we presented testified that ultimately they were manipulated by the use of drugs and physical force to continue to commit acts of prostitution and sell drugs to make profit for the outlaw motorcycle gang.
Are the federal cases, the ones going on here and elsewhere around the country, are they going to permanently break up the motorcycle gangs, do you think?
I think that the major motorcycle gangs, unlike some of the other organized crime ventures that have been investigated and prosecuted in the past, may be more susceptible to being successfully broken up by this type of activity than the more entrenched ones. They are still in their puberty, if you will. They're still in their growth period. That's another reason why they have finally, I think, drawn federal attention, is they have passed the point of simply being a bunch of isolated bikers. They have become an organized criminal activity at various stages of their development. The Hells Angels perhaps being more developed and more sophisticated than the Outlaws or the Banditos, but they and the Pagans, those four groups, have moved to the point where they are big-time crime. But they have not moved to the point where they are capable of protecting themselves in the way some of the traditional organized crime activities have. Certainly, as long as they rely upon their rejection of societal values and rely upon their rejection of societal attributes, they're more susceptible to being successfully prosecuted because they're more readily identifiable. It is unlikely that motorcycle gangs are going to be in the position to get involved in the types of public corruption activities that might lead to successfully protecting their conduct. I think they're ripe for this type of approach. Secondly, I think that the public will be educated, as they were educated in our case in Jacksonville. Hopefully, there'll be some teenage runaway girls, there'll be some teenagers at junior high schools and high schools where the outlaws are recruiting who will shy away from going to the clubhouse and getting involved in a drug party with these people because of what they've heard or seen in the media about what really happens once they get involved.
One last question.